Diary of a mid-30s girly.
Starts right now.
I'd be willing to bet that some of that 2025 New Year, New Me, motivation vibe, whatever, that you had going on just a couple days ago has already started to wane just a little bit. And I know this because same. That being said, I'd also be willing to bet that your desire for 2025 to be very different from 2024 has not changed, because also same. Which is why in today's episode, we're going to be talking about 24 things I think ought to be left in 2024 and what 25 things I think we should be bringing into 2025 in their place. Let's get into it.
Number 1.
Out for 2024, fawning and fixing. In for 2025, dignified discomfort. Chances are that if you're not a completely self-absorbed biatch, you may have felt at some point like you kind of need to be managing everyone else's emotions or like making sure that everybody is having a good time, etc., etc. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a terrible thing if, you notice someone at a table is really shy, then you turn to them and make sure that they're good. Like, I think that that's actually really kind. That being said, I think there's a difference between doing that because you have the energy, it feels right, it feels like the thing to do in the moment, and just taking that on as like your identity and your responsibility to manage everyone else's like emotions and well-being. You get what I'm saying? Now let me get to the fawning part, okay? What I definitely do not want to bring into 2025 is fawn in situations where people have clearly been rude or condescending to me, and I kind of laugh it off to keep the peace. Story time. I was at work once and I was helping this girl that had come in, and just out of nowhere, she says something about my engagement ring and gives me what is like clearly a backhanded compliment about it, okay? And a part of me was obviously like, what the fuck? Like who says shit like that, right? However, there was still inside of me, at least on that day, that little girl who used to have to fawn in uncomfortable, unpleasant situations to keep herself safe. And that little version of me kind of like laughed at her comment to keep the peace and like not let things get awkward. Even though I don't fault myself for having that response, once this girl walked away, I felt like I had betrayed myself in letting her get away with that. It felt so icky. It felt so gross. And to this day, like telling the story, I'm feeling like, the fuck, Danielle? Like, why did you let this bitch like pull the nice, nasty vibe on you? What I wish I would have done in that moment was like, taking a beat, maybe taking a breath and being like, what was that? Like, what did you mean by that? Something to that effect. I can accept that there are people who need to do that to make themselves feel better. However, I need to have my own back. If me and another individual are not collaborating on a mutually beneficial outcome, then it's me first.
Number 2.
Out for 2024, copious amounts of research. And in for 2025, step-by-step action. Okay, so back to the copious amounts of research. This also includes, by extension, elaborate over-the-top plans. It includes trying to over-optimize prior to any actual action taking. It is smart, I think, at the beginning of a project to brain dump all the potential steps you imagine you're going to have to complete as a way to get to your goal. But rather than just like brain dumping onto the page and then getting to work, I would research every single potential step into oblivion and then spend God knows how long trying to get every single potential step in the exact right order. Meanwhile, the project itself was just like sitting there collecting dust. I'm over it, okay? I've come to understand that the way that it works is that you need to figure out what you need to do first, and then you need to do it, okay? Then you get the feedback. Then you figure out your next move. Because of that, do it, figure out what you need to do next, then do it, right? I think that that's always been true, but in 2025, it's especially true. The landscape is shifting underneath our feet with every step that we take. Take this with a grain of salt, but like there's no use in projecting 10 years into the future when you don't know what next week looks like. So stop planning, start acting.
Number 3.
Out for 2024 is perfectionism and hiding. And in for 2025 is creating And as Seth Godin would say, shipping. Now, what really got me thinking about this was reading Rick Rubin's book. So good. But he talks about that phenomenon where your taste as an artist doesn't quite match up with your skills as a craftsperson. I think this can happen a lot, especially if you have ADHD, because, right, we tend to be multi-passionate people. And how does the saying go? Jack of all trades, master of none, right? So this is going to happen a lot. I don't know about you, but 5, 6, 7 times a day, I have some creative idea that I think would be really cool to bring into the world. But because I'm so scared of being judged for something not being extraordinary, I'll spend a month, 2 months, a year just trying to get it to a certain standard. Meanwhile, all those other ideas have left me and gone and found other artists who are willing to take a chance on them. But I want to be a volume creative this year. Even when it comes to this particular podcast episode, I had a grand idea for an elaborate visual thing that I would create for you guys to go along with this video. Last year, I would have spent weeks putting it together. This year, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to make the priority getting the information to you guys rather than caring about what you might think of my creative skills around this episode.
Number 4.
Out in 2024, slowness, and in for 2025, speed. In 2025, I really want to close the gap between ideation and execution. And this doesn't just apply to creative projects. I've heard this quote before, maybe you have as well. It's something like, money loves speed, time loves wealth. I think it's, people bring it up when they talk about investing or whatever. But for me, I'm not even at that point in my journey where I've got a bunch of investments going on. I need to make money, to be honest. So I need to start taking these ideas that I keep getting to make money and make them happen. And then when I have money, then we can worry about building wealth.
Number 5.
Out in 2024, being a frazzled bitch because of procrastination. And in for 2025, being a regulated queen because of preparation. Story time. For Christmas, Gabe and I traveled to North Carolina and we spent the holiday with his family. Now, the night before flying there, I did what I have always done. I started packing at midnight, knowing that I had to leave for the airport at 4 a.m. Okay. And as you can expect, I got 30 minutes of sleep. I get to the airport. It's already a show because, I get to the counter. I'm so frazzled. I'm exhausted. My brain's not working. I can't remember where I put my ID. And it gets to the point where the woman working the counter had to look at me and be like, "You're okay. Take a deep breath." Okay, it was like that. It was embarrassing. But on the way back from North Carolina, I decided to do something just a little bit different, okay? And that was pack my stuff just a little bit earlier. And I'm not even talking out of character early, literally just the afternoon prior instead of waiting until midnight. And let me tell you, that decision I think has truly changed the rest of my life. Because that night, I got a full night's sleep. I woke up the next morning. I wasn't rushing to pack or worrying that things weren't going to fit or my bag was over the weight limit or anything like that. All I had to do was, shower and get ready. I got to the airport. I had my wits about me and I got to be, for one of the first times I can remember in my entire life, calm at the airport because I was prepared. And I'm telling you, that experience flipped a switch in my brain. Since then, I have found myself going from planning, but then saving all the execution for the last minute to executing as early as possible so that I can be prepared and then just having to do tiny finishing touches at the end.
Number 6.
Out in 2024 is the need for certainty. And in for 2025 is tolerance for ambiguity. I just heard of this concept recently, but it's continued to show itself to me in just various random TikToks and stuff. I have spent so much of my life just trying to be safe. And what's more safe than absolute certainty, right? The thing that has finally clicked for me, though, is that certainty is an illusion. Yes, you can mitigate risk, but certainty is an illusion. And not only that, but it also defeats the purpose of this game that we're trying to play, the game of life, right? How many times have you heard someone say oh, if you could know exactly how every single day for the rest of your life is gonna go, would you want that? No. When I sit back and think about it, and this hurts to say, but it's true, I have spent so much of my life sitting on the bench. Truly. Because I've been too scared to make a mistake. Before I met Gabe, I would never let a man close enough to me to where I could fall in love with him, because then he would also have the power to hurt me. I have fleshed out so many creative projects in my life and then stuffed them in a metaphorical drawer because I didn't know how they would be received. Some of us want certainty so much that we'd rather be sure we are going to lose. That's a loser mindset if I ever heard one, okay? But the great thing about the game of life is that you can win the game by just playing, but like actually playing. Okay. And this isn't me saying be stupid, be reckless, just be, some things obviously do call for strategy, but I am done in 2025 stopping there. I am ready to step into the arena, even if the whole world has to watch me lose a few games before I finally win. You know what I mean?
Number 7.
Out in 2024 is big, over the top, pie in the sky, long-term goals. And in for 2025 is Microwinds. I think this is a great tip for anyone, but I think it's especially pertinent to those of us with ADHD, right? We have such slim time horizons that when I try to like conceptualize a year out, I'm like, wait, what? Like it doesn't feel real, okay? So yeah, it's probably going to take me a year to get my body the way that I want it to look. But when I think about that, it feels so abstract. So instead of worrying about all that, I'm going to worry about today. Today, I can get my steps in. Today, I can hit a Pilates class. Today, I can make myself a nutritious meal at home rather than just like ordering a pizza, etc., etc. When it comes to this YouTube channel, sure, I would love to have 1 million subscribers. Who wouldn't? But I need to stop worrying about getting my plaques and start thinking about just making videos. But okay, like one video at a time.
Number 8.
Out in 2024, scrolling at night. In for 2025, reading at night. Now, I think I've talked about this before on this channel, but I've had a rule for myself called Goblin Girl Hour. Basically, I don't really let myself scroll on any like short form content during the day because I always end up getting sucked in for way longer than I want or even expect to. And also, it squeezes dopamine out of your brain. Dr. K, who I love, has a really great video on this. I'll link it below if I remember. But yeah, so then what I do instead is I wait until like I'm done for the day, if it's like 8 p.m. or whatever, and then it's Goblin Girl Hour, and then yes, I am allowed to scroll until my heart's content. What I will say is that this is usually fine. This has worked very well for me for the most part, but there are times when it doesn't. If I haven't spent my battery for the day, I can scroll until like the wee hours of the night. This isn't as important to me as some of the other items on this list, but it's something I can improve upon. So,
Number 9.
out for 2024, more. In for 2025, better. I just want to have less, but love everything that I have. Because then you end up treating those items with a lot more respect too. Story time. 5-ish years ago, I bought this pair of boots. And it's not that they were expensive or like a fancy brand or anything like that, but I just loved the way that these boots looked on me. And as a result, I am not still out here shopping around for my perfect black boot. Like I found it. And I take care of them. Every time I'm done wearing them, I stuff the stuffing back into the sleevey part of the boot to help keep their shape. I put them back in their original box so that they don't collect dust and start to seem nasty to me or anything like that. And yeah, I just want to feel that way about everything that I own. Having less, and I went through this recently because Gabe and I moved, talk about that more another time, but having less allows every item to have a home, and the peace that that brings is indescribable.
Number 10.
Out in 2024, instant results. In for 2025, putting in the reps. I can't tell you how guilty I've been of this. Like, even just YouTube, for example, there are so many times where I've been like, this is the video that's gonna get me 100,000 subscribers or da 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 da, okay? That almost never happens, and so it's pointless to try and make it all about one thing. Even the manifestors know you can't get too graspy with the way things are going to happen or the bridge of incidents, right? What I need to do is just take it, kind of already said this, but like one video at a time, make it good so that it does what it needs to do, but not obsess over it being perfect because that's completely unattainable and unsustainable. And then, yeah, allow myself to have growth over time. Same thing with my food and body journeys, okay? I can't tell you how many crash diets I have been on. I always forget that this happens, but at the point in my life when I decided to stop crash dieting and I just worried about slow nutrition and like giving my body what it needed, the weight that I wanted to come off, it took care of itself, and that wasn't even my goal at that point.
Number 11.
Out in 2024 is The Perfect First Draft. And in for 2025 is what I'm going to call the reissue. I know I've talked about wanting to put out music before. The thing is, for a very long time, I carried around this feeling that, oh, if I'm going to bother to make a debut album or even just like a debut EP, whatever, then it has to be the best debut EP that anyone has ever heard of. And it has to have a concept, and it has to, each song has to flow into the other, and da 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 da, right? Like, you haven't even put out a song yet. The likelihood of this happening is zero. In addition to being completely obsessed with the result, I was also so obsessed with even the first step that I wouldn't even get my ideas onto the page. And so everything lived in my head. I've realized in 2024, perfect in my head doesn't count. I'm going to embrace the reissue. Now, this isn't exactly revolutionary, but it's a concept that's really helping me, and I think it's useful. It's just realizing that we live in a completely different age. There was a time when if an artist put out an album, it's like once shit was on like the CD or the vinyl, like that was that. In the digital age, like it's so common for people to remake things. But yeah, if I've done the best that I can with what I have, I need to be putting it out into the world. I should be doing that regardless, but it just helps knowing that I could gain the skills and a year later do like a more polished remix. Stop having a super sky high bar at the start for myself and instead give myself gold stars for showing up and shipping.
Number 12.
Speaking of showing up, out for 2024, strict permanent routines. In for 2025, a minimum viable practice. There was a time in my life when I was convinced that I needed to nail down my ideal perfect week, and that I needed to live that week over and over and over and over again. And if I didn't nail it every time, then I was a mess, right? Now, my thing is like, I'm going to towel off my makeup at night and like brush my teeth and brush my hair, and anything else is extra. And with laundry, it's not like I need to do laundry every Wednesday night at 6 p.m. when I get home. It's enough to just notice, oh, the laundry basket is full. Like, let me throw a load in, right? None of this has to be like a military grade regimented system, okay?
Number 13.
Out for 2024 is complacency, and in for 2025 is intention. I'm a Pisces. I also have ADHD. I am, at my core, a very go with the flow kind of okay? I don't like to make commitments, especially too far in advance. I'm not the type to plan an itinerary when I travel, okay? I just don't like to be tied down in general. And this quality has its perks. I like to think it makes me chill. It makes me adaptable, okay? That said, there is a difference between being chill and go with the flow and adaptable and just being blown about by the wind, okay? And yeah, this year I just really want to bring a lot more intentionality into how I spend my days.
Number 14.
Now, this one could be seemingly contradictory to the last one, but hear me out. Out for 2024 is control and rigidity, and in for 2025 is surrender and fluidity. Now, what I will say about this is that sometimes when I do want something, I get very graspy about exactly how it should go down, right? But of course, kind of said this earlier, but if you're into manifestation at all, you need to know what you want, but let the universe take care of how it's going to get you there. You know what I mean? And I got a real life reminder of this very recently. In fact, on the trip back, Gabe and I decided to upgrade our seats to give him a little bit more leg room, right? But it meant that according to our new tickets, we weren't going to sit together. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, I need to call the airline. I need to kind of pre-plan if they can't do it, what I'm going to need to say to people around us and seeing if they'd be willing to switch and calculating like if they have kids and if they seem like they want the windows. Okay. And at one point I had to tell myself, you know what, Danielle, it is not that deep. Like the universe will take care of it. And even if it doesn't, like maybe the universe wants you to not sit next to Gabe and chat his ear off during the flight, and it wants you to sit by yourself and edit your freaking YouTube video. Okay. So I let up. We board. We, say goodbye to each other. Sure enough, the gentleman sitting next to me is like, oh, like, would you like to sit next to your husband? Like, I don't mind swapping.
Number 15.
Out for 2024, isolating myself, and in for 2025, finding and nourishing a community. If you know anything about Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENFP, which they say is the most introverted extrovert. And ain't that the truth, okay? I do need my alone time, but I actually really like people. Ever since 2020, I haven't made it a priority to try and go out and make myself some friends. And I think that has impacted me more than I actually fully realized. And this ties, I think, directly into our next item.
Number 16.
Out for 2024 is zoning out and numbing myself. And in for 2025 is complete presence. I think that I unconsciously isolated myself so much because when you're alone, you don't have to change out of the sweatpants you've been wearing for 4 days. No one's around to judge you for hoovering down a bag of Doritos while you scroll TikTok for 6 hours, right? I used to think that I loved this time to myself, but last year it finally clicked for me. Oh, actually, these are numbing behaviors. I do these things not because they're fun and they feel good, but because they help me to not think and not feel how unsatisfied I am with certain areas of my life and so on. What's funny is that because these behaviors always made me feel like I would always swear off of them, but I don't think I realized until last year is that the trick isn't completely swearing off the Doritos. It's understanding what makes me reach for them and want to zone out with them in the first place.
Number 17.
Out for 2024 is what I'm calling checkmark mentality, aka busy work. And in for 2025 is leverageable execution, aka needle movers. Now, this kind of ties back to the section where I talked about making elaborate plans and then feeling the need to check off every single task just because it was there. I'm assuming that this is because crossing a task off your to-do list does give you a bit of a dopamine hit. However, something clicked for me this year, thank God, and that's that I need to give up this gold star mentality. Like just giving myself a pat on the back for doing something even if it doesn't really contribute to my goals, like organizing my sock drawer. And instead this year, I really want to focus on the tasks that actually make a difference to the outcomes I want in my life. Deciding not to do something because it's not important is just as valid of a reason to cross it off your list as is actually completing that task.
Number 18.
Out in 2024 is being a soggy emotional sponge, and in for 2025 is being a wrung out emotional sponge. If you're not familiar with human design, you might not know what I'm talking about, but I have what's called an undefined solar plexus. And this has, its pros and its cons, but sometimes I think I don't always operate from the healthiest place with that. I can really soak up and even amplify emotions in a way that's not always fun. You know what I mean? So this year, I really want to try to continue to feel those emotions, but let them pass through me without taking them on as my own. Does that make sense?
Number 19.
Out for 2024, bad posture, and in for 2025, good posture. Okay. I used to think that posture was just about elegance and like looking poised and all that. But this last year in particular, I've really learned it actually impacts your health in so many ways that most of us don't even realize. And I'm not just talking about, neck, shoulders, back, even your tongue. And since I've become more cognizant of it, I've noticed I have a lot less tension in the SCM muscles on the side of your neck, my neck. They're normally so tight and so tense, but ever since I started being aware of my tongue and keeping it on the roof of my mouth, that doesn't happen anymore.
Number 20.
Out for 2024 is caring about what it looks like, and in for 2025 is caring about what it is. Now, this could apply to so many different areas of your life, but I want to talk first about something that a random TikTok brought to my attention. For many years when I was younger, I lived in a home where I was just expected to be productive at all times. Like, I could not be seen relaxing. I realized that, like, I have carried this into my adulthood. Like, sometimes Gabe would get home from work or whatever, and if I happened to be like relaxing on the couch, I would find myself having this feeling of like, oh, I've been caught. He never made me feel this way. It was absolutely like a carryover from my childhood. That said, it is still so baked in that I'll find myself, even if what I'm doing on my phone is productive, wanting to either like explain myself or even like go as far as to change what I'm doing. And I hate that. I know it's going to take a while to get that out of my system, but I am committed to doing that this year. Now, that's probably a really weirdly specific example, but for someone else, that could look like caring what your life feels like to you instead of what it feels like on Instagram, or caring about like the quality of an item rather than if it just happens to have a luxury label on it. Maybe caring about your true nature and your character rather than your reputation and what other people might be saying or thinking about you.
Number 21.
Out for 2024, I'm calling this scattered spaghetti. And in for 2025, funneled focus. I have really struggled with what it means to be a multi-passionate person, right? I'm sure a lot of us do. But in the past, I would want to go from, oh, I want to put out an album. And then when I'm a little bored with that and I really want to explore like my writing capabilities, oh, I want to come out with a book. And then next thing you know, 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be designing a fashion line, right? I was out here like digging a lot of holes, but these holes were all very shallow and there was no way I was going to like find the treasure. Okay, this is like a meme or something. I've realized this last year that the best thing I can do for myself actually is not just like give up on all those things that capture my attention, but find a way to marry them all together. And that's what this podcast is, right? With this, I have the ability to marry many of my interests and my different skills or whatever into one endeavor. And that way I'm able to go a lot farther without burning out or even just getting bored.
Number 22.
Out in 2024, raw dogging life, and in for 2025 is actually taking my meds. Okay. When I first got my ADHD diagnosis in 2023, I took my meds consistently for like a week. I think it's because I expected to feel something. And so because I didn't feel anything physically, I was like, oh, I don't think it's working. But then I ended up moving. I ended up getting a new psychiatrist. You know, we did some experimenting like with my dosage and stuff. And long story short, I realized, oh, my meds do work for me. Because I've been taking them long enough and consistently enough, I've been able to pick up on patterns that I couldn't have gotten from a week's worth of data. When I don't take them, I notice that my mind is very ping-pongy. But when I do take my meds, I find myself able to think in like a clear, linear manner. I can string sentences together. I can, not forget what I was saying in the middle of a sentence. It's a good feeling, and I'd like to keep that up this year.
Number 23.
Out for 2024 is taking pretty much anything for granted, and in for 2025 is making it magic. There are many, many times where I have taken like the day itself for granted. Sometimes I let myself dress and even smell, probably, to be honest, like an absolute trash goblin. And I'll do that because like I'm not leaving the house that day. But if I knew it were my last day on earth, would I want to go out in a ranch stained sweater I've been wearing for 3 days? Or would I like to go out looking and feeling like a baddie, you know? Gabe and I knew very early on that we weren't going to stay in LA for very long, but I let the whole, oh, this is temporary thing keep me from investing in making that my home at all. And I see now how much that spilled out into other areas of my life. And I know I'm not just making that up, because in apartments that I've had before, like my apartment in New York, my apartment when I lived in Italy, I made sure that they were cute and aesthetic and homey. And because of that, I wanted to invite people over. I felt just creatively inspired because everything was, aesthetic or whatever. Because I wanted to keep things looking aesthetic, I kept things more clean. But in our LA apartment, I didn't. And it's not because it was a shitty apartment. It was a beautiful apartment. So much sunlight, 20-foot high ceilings. Okay, it had so much potential. And I squandered it because it was temporary. Even though really it wasn't that temporary. It was like 1.5 years that we were there. So riddle me that. I have to remember that everything is temporary. You know what I mean? But that's not an excuse to not make the best of what you have in that moment. And in fact, I actually believe that the universe will not continue to bless you with more if you don't show gratitude and respect to what you already have. Lesson learned.
Number 24.
This is a big one. Out in 2024, suffering and settling. And in for 2025, luxury and ease. I realized last year that I really needed to mend my relationship with money. I was taught growing up that people with money were inherently greedy and selfish. I romanticized the starving artist life as very bohemian, and cool. I believed that there was virtue in making do with less, and so on. Now, to be clear, like I just said, I do believe it is almost a moral imperative that we all have to make the best of what we have. But it's taken me a really long time to understand that you don't have to stay there. And in fact, I've come to believe that staying stagnant goes against the very nature of an ever-expanding universe. Now, I don't really consider myself formally part of any organized religion, but one of the first things God ever said to Adam and Eve in the garden, right, was be fruitful and multiply. But when I was younger, I took it so literally and I thought it was just about going out and making more babies or whatever. But the more that I walk the spiritual path that I'm on, I believe that it's a lot more than that. I believe that God, the universe, whatever, wants us to grow, wants us to create, wants us to take a seed and then plant it and water it and let it bloom into a tree that eventually feeds a whole village, maybe generations of a village, In other words, we are given gifts, but it's our duty to leverage them into more. We do not need to suffer to be good and pious and righteous. You can make money in ways that are ethical. It's not sinful or vain to enjoy beautiful, well-crafted things. And in fact, why would churches and temples and mosques be so ornate and beautiful if we didn't believe that God and beauty belong together? Life will always have its ups and downs, but struggle doesn't need to be the default setting.
Number 25.
No out, but in for 2025 is getting back on my spiritual path. I kind of just talked about it in the previous point, a lot about it in my previous point, but I've had a lot of chapters in my personal spiritual journey, but there was a time that I was so strong in it. I felt very connected to God and the universe, and that spilled out into so many areas of my life and made my life so much better. And in recent years, I've really fallen off that. But I feel myself being called back to it, and I already feel it making a difference in my life. So I'm really excited to continue that the rest of this year. So yeah, those are my 24 outs that I closed the chapter on in 2024, and the 25 things that I can't wait to continue doing in 2025. If you want me to expand on any of my ins or outs, I would love to, so just let me know in the comments. I'll be taking stock of that as I start working on the next episode. Thank you so much for being here. I love you guys, and I'll see you soon.